The summer Della Pruitt reached the age of 11, she began collecting discarded items from other farmers. Every Saturday morning, she would cycle her bicycle along the unpaved roads of Calloway County, Kentucky, stopping at the perimeters of fields where outdated equipment lay neglected and rusting amongst the grass. Her objective was not to gather scrap metal for sale, nor was she constructing a playhouse. She harbored a solitary, unspoken aim, a secret she kept to herself. She approached farmhouses, knocked on doors, and made polite inquiries. The response was invariably the same from one farmer to the next. "Of course, dear, help yourself." They would then lean against their porch railings, observing her as she maneuvered cumbersome, broken aluminum irrigation pipes into a wooden trailer her father had fashioned for her. A gentle, perplexed amusement would ripple through them, a laughter born not of mockery, but of sheer bewilderment. An 11-year-old girl collecting old pipes. By the time August rolled around, she possessed more pipe than some of the active farms in the county. And she hadn't divulged her intentions to a single person. No one grasped her plan, not even her father, but their ignorance was about to end. If narratives of perseverance, familial bonds, and the understated wisdom found in ordinary settings resonate with you, please subscribe and join our weekly installments. Share your thoughts in the comments section, letting us know your viewing location. We are eager to understand the reach of this story. Calloway County is nestled in the westernmost part of Kentucky, where the terrain gently slopes towards the Tennessee River. Summers here are exceptionally warm, often feeling like an overabundance of heat. By July, the sky takes on the muted hue of aged brass. The air carries the rich scent of tilled soil, diesel fuel, and drying hay. It was a locale where families had cultivated the same parcels of land for 4 generations, and they took pride in this legacy. Della Pruitt, the middle of 3 children, was born to Harlan and June Pruitt, who managed approximately 40 acres of fertile river bottom land. Harlan cultivated corn and soybeans, occasionally turning to tobacco when market prices were favorable. He was a man of deliberate habits and measured speech, patient in most aspects of life, save for drought, which tested his resilience like nothing else. June maintained a kitchen garden of remarkable scope, brimming with tomatoes, peppers, squash, and pole beans, supported by stakes hewn from cedar. It was June who first placed seeds into Della's small hands, when Della was barely old enough to reach the soil without bending her knees. Della's grandmother, Opal, resided in a modest room adjoining the rear of the farmhouse. At 81 years of age, she spent most mornings at the kitchen table, sipping black coffee and poring over agricultural extension pamphlets she had been collecting since the 1960s. She read them with the same absorption as others might a novel. It was Opal who first observed that Della viewed the fields with a discernment beyond that of other children. Her gaze wasn't fixed on the crops, but on the water. She noted where it pooled, where it flowed away, where the soil showed the earliest signs of cracking in dry spells, and where it retained its darkness longest after rainfall. As Calloway County entered its 3rd consecutive year of below-average precipitation, Della began to perceive a problem that the adults around her had simply resigned themselves to enduring. Her father's soybean crops in the higher fields were languishing. The soil, being sandier, allowed water to drain through too rapidly to be of much benefit. The county extension agent, a man of calm demeanor named Clifton Barr, had visited twice to assess the situation and offered his recommendations. Irrigate more frequently. Apply mulch around the base of plants to conserve moisture. However, more frequent irrigation incurred costs in terms of both money and diesel fuel. Furthermore, the water pressure was insufficient to propel the lines to the elevated ground without the system losing efficacy midway across the field. Della absorbed every word Clifton Barr uttered. She posed questions that were unusual for an 11-year-old. If the pressure diminishes when going uphill, what happens to the water that never reaches the top? Clifton paused. It simply stops. It remains in the pipe. She nodded slowly, a gesture common to those who have contemplated a matter extensively and are seeking a final piece of confirmation. This discussion occurred in May. By June, she had commenced her collection of pipes. What Della comprehended, and what many of the adults around her had not fully grasped, was this. Water is indifferent to cost. It is governed solely by gravity. The upper fields on her father's farm were situated approximately 14 feet higher than the pond at the property's lowest point, a small, spring-fed basin that had never been entirely depleted, even during the most severe summers. 14 feet of elevation, that was the difference, and Della had been studying Opal's aged pamphlets. She had learned about drip irrigation, a method that delivers water directly to plant roots through slow-release emitters as opposed to overhead sprinklers. This technique conserves up to 60% less water, as none evaporates from the sun-baked soil or flows downhill ineffectively. She had also read about gravity-fed systems, designs from an era predating electric pumps, where water from a higher elevation flows downhill through pipes to reach lower fields. The pond on her father's farm was situated below the affected fields, rendering this approach inapplicable. However, there was a seasonal catchment, a shallow depression on the north edge of the property, where rainwater naturally accumulated after storms, lingering for days before being absorbed into the earth or evaporating. This depression was situated above the problem fields at an elevation of about 9 feet. 9 feet of elevation, channeled through an appropriate pipe network, provided sufficient head pressure to drip irrigate a quarter of an acre without the need for any pump, and she possessed the pipes to construct it. What she assembled that summer lacked elegance. It was a child's interpretation of an engineer's concept, pieced together with an assortment of mismatched PVC fittings, sections of old aluminum lateral pipe that her father had replaced 3 years prior, and a roll of drip tape she had purchased at the farm supply store in town, with money saved from selling eggs. She excavated shallow trenches by hand. Her father observed from a distance during the first weekend, offering no comment, and then quietly retrieved a shovel and assisted her with the digging without inquiring about her project. That was Harlan's way. Her older brother Cass considered the entire endeavor a waste of summer. Her younger sister Wren, finding it reminiscent of a science project, stayed nearby, handing Della tools she didn't always require. The initial attempt proved unsuccessful. The connections at the collection basin were not sufficiently sealed, and the entire system leaked at 3 separate joints before it had traversed 10 yards down the slope. Della resealed every connection with plumber's tape and attempted again. The second effort generated enough pressure to reach the first row of plants, but barely. The emitters released a meager, inconsistent trickle. Some plants received water, most did not. She returned to Opal's pamphlets. She discovered a passage concerning pipe diameter and flow rate, explaining how a pipe's width influences not only the volume of water that moves, but also the speed at which pressure equalizes along its length. The sections she had utilized for the main conduit were too narrow. She needed to increase the diameter at the collection point and then gradually reduce it in the emitter lines. She spent 2 weeks exchanging pipe sections with a retired farmer named Wendell Coe, whose barn was filled with irrigation equipment from a commercial vegetable operation he had ceased in 2009. He allowed her to trade her smaller pipes for his larger sections, and he did so without charging her, stating that he admired her tenacity. On the third attempt, the system functioned. By mid-August, the soybeans in the upper field were the most robust plants on the farm. Harlan was the first to notice. He walked the rows twice before speaking. The soil was dark and moist. The leaves were a deep green, held upright and broad, a posture indicative of plants free from stress. In the adjacent rows, to which the gravity-fed lines had not yet extended, the identical soybean variety appeared pale and was beginning to curl due to heat stress. He went to locate his daughter. She was adjusting an emitter near the top of the run, lying flat on the ground to reach it. He stood there for a moment, observing her. "How much water is this system using?" he inquired finally. She provided him with a figure. The amount was approximately 40% of what his conventional system employed to supply the same area. He remained silent for a considerable period. Then he asked, "Would you like to extend it to the east field?" Clifton Barr returned in September, officially. He inspected the entire system with Della, posing questions and taking notes. His demeanor suggested a man recalibrating his understanding. He stated he had never witnessed a gravity-fed drip network constructed from salvaged materials, yield such results on a family farm. He asked if he might bring an agricultural engineering student from Murray State the following spring. A reporter from the local newspaper eventually made an appearance as well. She penned a feature article that occupied the front page, positioned below the fold. The headline proclaimed Della a young innovator. Della found the term rather awkward. By the time October arrived, word had spread. The farmers who had handed Della their old pipes, those who had chuckled from their porch rails, drove out to witness it for themselves. They arrived with the intention of being cordial. They were wholly unprepared for what they encountered. The upper field displayed a distinctly different hue compared to every other field in the county. While neighboring rows appeared thin and yellowish from the prolonged dry summer, Della's soybeans were dense and a profound green. The canopy was so luxuriant it nearly obscured the soil beneath. The plants stood erect, laden with pods, their leaves angled upward as if they possessed a sense of pride. Several of the farmers walked the rows in silent contemplation. One of them plucked the pod and split it open with his thumbnail. He examined it for a prolonged moment, then looked at the 11-year-old girl standing at the field's edge, her boots dusted with soil. "What did you do differently?" he asked. She demonstrated the pipes, the catchment, the force of gravity, the emitters dispensing water slowly and consistently just beneath the surface, delivering it directly to the roots without any wastage through evaporation or runoff. This was the same water that these men had never given a second thought to allowing to pool and disappear. She guided them through every joint, every fitting, every length of salvaged aluminum that had once been destined for a scrap heap. The laughter had vanished. In its place was something more subdued, something that takes longer to manifest than laughter, yet endures considerably longer. Several of them inquired if Della would assist them in establishing a similar setup before the subsequent planting season. She confirmed that she would. Masanobu Fukuoka, the Japanese farmer and philosopher, once wrote, "The ultimate goal of farming is not the growing of crops, but the cultivation and perfection of human beings." Della Pruitt grew soybeans that summer. Exceptional soybeans, water efficient, soil healthy, and drought resistant, outperforming fields managed by individuals with decades of experience. However, that was not the primary harvest. The true harvest was something less tangible, more difficult to quantify. The patience of a child who observed water rather than crop yields. The willingness to solicit items that others deemed worthless. The discipline to face failure twice and rebuild without complaint. Genuine agricultural knowledge seldom originates from costly equipment. It arises from diligent observation, from the understanding that what others discard still possesses utility if one is inclined to discern its purpose. Della is now 12 years old. She is already designing an expanded system for the East Field. Wendell Coe is assisting her with the calculations. Opal continues to read her pamphlets, and the pipes that once rusted at the edges of fields throughout Calloway County are now instrumental in fostering growth. What agricultural lesson from Della's narrative has stayed with you? Please share it in the comments. We review every submission. Inform us of your viewing location. This community extends further than you might imagine, and if stories such as this hold importance for you, kindly subscribe. We will present another next week.